give you 2-gram packets, and they will not be caught for that. Or even if they are caught, they will be detained for a week and
then let off.
will be killed because it's a bailable offense. So yes, checks and balances are required. Awareness is required. We are doing our part, but I may not be able, or me and my colleagues may not be able to go to whole Kashmir. Okay,
Correct.
Other organizations side by side, they are working as well. But yes, there needs to be a public and psychological, more psychological public interactions so that people are more aware.
Right.
And yes, administration is trying to do their jobs, but there are a lot of
Well, there are challenges, but at various levels, we have to be aware of a problem, we have to be aware of a threat, and we have to be aware of a nefarious intent. Yana Mir, Javed Beg, and Dr. Meher Radha, thank you very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, 280 days and counting. Jammu and Kashmir is functioning, there are no bunds. This is perhaps the longest period that schools have remained open uninterrupted. We'll get you that story of Naya Jammu and Kashmir very soon here at CNN News 18. For the moment, winding up this edition of The Right Stand, Brass Tacks follows.
Good evening, you're watching Brass Tacks with me, Anusha Soni. The Tawang issue continues to dominate the winter session of the parliament. The opposition staged a walkout led by Congress leader Mrs. Sonia Gandhi. Mrs. Gandhi also released a statement slamming the government for refusing to allow a discussion on the floor of the House. While the opposition parties continue to demand a discussion, irresponsible statements on the Indo-China conflict seem to be the norm. Earlier, it was Rahul Gandhi who was slammed by the BJP for saying that Chinese are thrashing our forces. Now it's Shiv Sena leader from the Thackeray faction, Sanjay Raut, who has made yet another loose comment on an issue concerning national security. Amidst this political stalemate over the issue, two crucial aspects stand out. One is the thorough absence of any constructive dialogue and debate on a matter of national security. And second is the complete breakdown of political cooperation between opposition and government, which any mature democracy may warrant on an issue as serious as this one. Cutting through the clutter and sieving through the tamasha, we discuss what lies ahead and whether the constructive dialogue is lost to political stunts. Has India's national security being undermined? First up, a special report.
जिन्होंने 2000 स्क्वायर किलोमीटर हिंदुस्तान का उठा लिया, जो हमारे जवानों को अरुणाचल प्रदेश में पीट रहे हैं।
चाइना को इन चीज भी नहीं देगी, लेकिन चाइना घुस गया है। हम भी घुसेंगे।
It's open season between the opposition and the centre after the armies of India and China clashed in Arunachal Pradesh earlier this month. But in targeting the Modi government, the opposition is only mocking our soldiers who are bravely defending our borders at 70,000 feet despite the hostile environment. First, it was Congress MP Rahul Gandhi who claimed that our troops are being thrashed by the Chinese.
हमारे जवानों को अरुणाचल प्रदेश में पीट रहे हैं।
Now, Uddhav Sena MP Sanjay Raut has equated the border battle in Belagavi to the tussle in Tawang.
चाइना घुस गया है, हम भी घुसेंगे।
Provocative statements aside, the opposition has stalled parliamentary business for more than a week now, adamant on their demand for a discussion on China. While opposition MPs protested in front of the Gandhi statue in Parliament, Congress MP Sonia Gandhi claimed that by disallowing a debate on China, the centre is disrespecting democracy.
डिमांड यही है कि सदन में चर्चा चाहते हैं। जो चाइनीज आक्रमण कर रहा है, सारे देश के लोगों को मालूम हो। यही चर्चा अगर नहीं हुई, एक तरफा उत्तर हुआ, तो उसका क्या मतलब है? अगर इस वक्त
The BJP tried to turn the tables on the Congress.
2005 में जब मैं अपोजिशन में थे और चाइना बॉर्डर का इशू उठाया था, तो उन्होंने बोला कि चाइना बॉर्डर का जो इशू होता है वो बहुत सेंसिटिव होता है, इसलिए पार्लियामेंट में चर्चा नहीं करके उसको इंटरनली डील करना चाहिए, और हम लोगों ने उसमें प्रेस नहीं किया। आज वही कांग्रेस पार्टी बार बार कह रहे हैं कि इसको चर्चा में लाना चाहिए।
From mocking our soldiers to questioning the centre, is the opposition trivializing national security?
Well, has the issue of national security been trivialized in our political discourse, especially coming in from some netas in the opposition ranks? Joining us on the broadcast is Shazia Almi, the BJP spokesperson. Aishwarya Mahadev from the Congress party also joins us on the broadcast. Sanjana Gadi, who is the spokesperson of Shiv Sena from the Uddhav Thackeray faction, is also with us on the broadcast. Lieutenant General Kulkarni, the former DG Infantry, is also with us, and Professor Victor Gao, who's a Chinese, who was a former Chinese diplomat, is also joining us on the broadcast. Aishwarya, I'm coming to you first. The government of India says and reminds the Congress party that there have been various instances in the past when matters pertaining to China and national security were not discussed on the floor of the House, keeping the sensitivity of the matter at hand. Why does the Congress party, despite the concerns raised by the government, continue to insist on a discussion? And the second limb of the argument are the loose statements coming in from various Congress leaders. We have had the kind of, response coming in from the BJP about the statement made by Rahul Gandhi. We also have the Shiv Sena leader. I'll take his reaction. But first, about the strategy and thinking of the Congress party when it comes to national security. Aishwarya ji.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Please go ahead.
First and foremost, let me remind everybody and also remind myself that at the end of the day, we're still a democracy. There is discussion, there is scope for argumentation, there is also scope for actual debate on what is happening. The Indian National Congress has emphatically made it very, very clear through the Congress President, Mr. Kharge, and the other Congress leaders that we stand united with the nation. We stand united with any action against China. However, that does not preclude us from staying completely silent about the fact that a lot of the reasons why this sort of aggression is happening again and again is also caused by the government and its actions itself. And at the end of it, whatever statements there may be, it doesn't take away from the fact that the BJP is engaging in a lot of whataboutery about who said what and what not, but they're not engaging in a discussion about how this could have been prevented. You had people martyred at the borders, and what was the result? You saw apps like TikTok banned, while trade is an all-time high. You see military exercises with China still continuing, where they're not even seen as an aggressor nation. You see far more permanent settlements than anywhere else. So please, I will support you. The Indian National Congress will stand by its Jawans, because mind you, the Jawans of this nation are not synonymous with the current dispensation. They belong to absolutely
Then how does one understand the statement of Rahul Gandhi ki hamare jawan pit rahe hain? How does one understand that?
Do you not realize for a fact of the matter that we've had a lot of our soldiers martyred, and this time, luckily enough,
but is that the language of any political leader belonging to India? That's the question which is being asked.
Do you really want to get into the sort of severity of statements or things that have been derogatory?
Well, that's dominating the political discourse. So I'm bound to ask you those questions.
Can I complete?
Please.
It is not about semantics. The semantics of it has turned into an entire debate in itself, and Mr. Jaishankar, instead of telling you what positive steps they've taken against China, has decided to take on an attack against Mr. Rahul Gandhi. Keep the semantics aside, keep the dialogues or the statements you want to tackle aside, and go to the essence of the problem. The problem lies in the fact that you have a completely underfunded and underarmed army at the borders, and you see Jawans who are basically falling like cannon fodder. Previously, this time we were able to prevent it. But
the kind of language that the Congress party is using, is it really good for the morale of our Jawans? And more importantly, is that the political front that India would want to put as a political community, especially when you're facing an adversary like China?
The Congress party does not believe trivializing of this debate comes from words or dialogues from our side. The trivializing comes from the fact that at one time you talk about a 56-inch chest and you talk about Lal Ankh while you're wearing a red shirt to welcome people for G20, and you decide to sit on a swing with premiers of nations that are aggressors to you. The trivialization of this entire matter and trivializing security comes from the sheer lack of political will of the current dispensation to arm our forces enough to fend off China and to give them an appropriate.
I want to bring in Shazia Almi ji of the BJP as well into the discussion. Shazia ji, I'm sure you have a lot of rebuttal to give to Aishwarya, but the question that the Congress party is asking is, and that letter of Mrs. Sonia Gandhi also says, that at the end of the day we are democracy, and there should be a free, honest, and open discussion about important issues. And what is the strategy of the government of India going forward, especially concerning LAC?
And I'm sure the government of India will answer, and it has answered. But going back to the topic of discussion, it is not our foreign minister who who started commenting on Rahul Gandhi, but it was Rahul Gandhi who I mean, to my greatest amusement, Rahul Gandhi talking about depth of understanding and lack of understanding and lacking depth, and he attributed this lack of depth of understanding of foreign relations and external affairs to Jai Shankar ji. So I thought that was rather hilarious and if not completely ludicrous. And not just that, in the parliament itself, Mr. EAM, External Affairs Minister, did say that there were references made to his lack of understanding when he explained on what is happening between India and China and where does India stand. Not just that, there have been updates, and we all know what is going on at LAC. As much as we need to know, as much as this can be discussed in the parliament, it being a democracy. But so that's one thing, and I'm sure the Indian government and the chiefs of the armed forces and the military intelligence are on top of it. I have complete faith. But resorting to everything internal that goes on, a feud, I mean, or an issue like resolution over the Maharashtra-Karnataka border row, and making it all out to be like China has invaded us. Look at China; they're deep within the terrains of India. Or I think that is such a, not only is it very juvenile and puerile, but it's also completely undesirable, and it just shows sheer lack of maturity of the Congress party to bringing down not just the country's morale, but also being completely inaccurate about what's actually going on.
One of the things that was said by the Congress party right now and even earlier is that the BJP is diverting the attention to semantics of what is being said or blowing a few statements out of context and out of proportion, only to defer their responsibility and taking the onus as to what is happening along the LAC.
So, the whole theory of cause and effect. So if Sanjay Raut had not said this, there would not have been a discussion on the subject. Similarly, so it's very basic. I mean, people short on comprehension, and there are enough, I'm sure, who are challenged where the powers of comprehension goes. If Rahul Gandhi had not made the statement कि हमारे जवान पीटे जा रहे हैं, there would not have been a discussion. So you don't want BJP to distract or obfuscate. Then don't come up with such completely, if I can say the word, idiotic statements, which really you run yourself down, not just your country, your forces, your government, your executive, your jawans and your troops, but you run yourself down and you cut a sorry figure. And nobody wants to believe you. Nobody will trust you because we are seeing the reality is very different. China nahi ghusaya hai. I mean, you can score brownie points. It's all right. But to say something like this is completely, I mean, it's completely treacherous as far as I go. I mean, it's all right, politics, you do politics. I mean, look at Shashi Tharoor. He said something very decent, in fact. And he says that, you insult the Prime Minister, it's the Prime Minister of our country, So that is also...
Answer that point. I mean, that's an interesting point to raise, that you might want to point out that BJP or certain sections of media are just only cherry-picking the statement, blowing it out of context. But isn't the Congress party, which has good professional experience on its side, you have been in the government, your party has veteran leaders, tall politicians, then why these kind of loose statements really come, in the public domain? National security may be one of the strong points of the BJP, but you're also not a political novice. You're the oldest party of this country. Then why falter on an issue like national security?
Being the oldest party in this country, and also that has inevitably fought for the freedom of this nation and for the idea of a democracy in our country, I think it's up to us to try and preserve parliamentary democracy and ask for answers and for accountability where required. Let us make this unequivocally clear. We stand with the country and we stand with our armed forces against any sort of aggressor, and we do not need any lectures on how to defend our borders because we have enough experience, and you've seen the Jawans under our capable leadership also the way that they've acted. However, let us also make clear that, Shazia ji spoke about something very interesting, saying, it obfuscated only because Rahul Gandhi ji spoke about it. In the same issue, Rahul Gandhi ji said this. He says, I don't think any of you will talk about China. Why was that? because there was obviously a large amount of secrecy where the minister did not even come out and talk about what had happened until media channels decided to report about it. And the fact of the matter is, whether you like it or not, I am very glad that media channels picked it up as a guide for attacking Rahul
No, that
Gandhi.
is not true. Media channels have been talking about it, and there has been a complete statement. That is not true. And it does not take a Rahul Gandhi to set the agenda of the media of this country.
Let me just complete. The fact of the matter remains, while you may have directed your arsenal at taking down the leaders of the opposition, you have also laid bare the fact that the government is caught unaware in a lot of situations because the army is underprepared.
Tell me something. No. Now, once again, you're saying army is underprepared. No, Aishwarya. Tell me something. You're saying army is underprepared. You're saying that media is unaware. How does Congress party get all of that kind of information? More importantly, is that the kind of language you will use for armed forces of this country? We just don't face a war or some kind of transgressions at the LAC. We are also facing an information propaganda and being very closely watched by the Chinese information and propaganda machinery. The political dispensation, whether in opposition or in the government, needs to mind their language when they talk about national security. You're saying army is underprepared. How do you know? Have there not been lives lost along the LOC or the LAC when the Congress government was in power? Have we always not had these adversarial relationships with China and Pakistan? Is that a new reality that has come under this present political dispensation?
In fact, how dare you say it? How dare you say it, Aishwarya? I mean, I would say shame on you for saying this. I mean, saying on national television that Indian army is underprepared? How dare you?
You statistics.
How dare you? No, do not quote statistics. Do not. I'm telling you, do not. Please, if you want to be, if this is part of the Communist Party's propaganda to have you speaking for them, then say it. Do not say it, because I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I think no, it's not. I will shout, not just shout. I will not allow anybody to say that about my army.
No, we do take very strong objection to a statement like that. Aishwarya,
I want to say I take objection to what has just been said.
No, I take objection to that as well. I take objection to that as well. Aishwarya, what is the data? What is the empirical evidence that you have to back the claim that you're making right now? Back it with data.
Anusha, 1 second. Let me give you this. Right? This is a report from the Air Force itself where it says that it requires 43 squadrons of aircrafts while they have basically 30. The Navy also talks about how underprepared they are.
Is this situation new? Is this situation new? Is this deficit of resources being created in the last 10 years?
There was a journalist who did that, who passed on information to perpetrators of terror, who were waging war against India.
At this juncture, I do want to bring in Lieutenant General Sanjay, who's also with us on the broadcast. Lieutenant General Kulkarni, you heard the political netas, and I don't need to point out the statements.
No, please don't call me a political neta. I'm a regular citizen of India.
Shazia ji, my reference to you is not to you. My reference is not to you. My reference is not to either Aishwarya or Shazia. Can I please ask a question to Mr. Kulkarni? Mr. Kulkarni, we have heard the political netas of this country and the kind of discourse that has come in, whether it's the Congress Party or Shiv Sena. As somebody who served the country on the front lines, how do you see this political discourse?
Thank you, Anusha. Now, first and foremost, let's not make issues of national security for political bickerings. It's not done. And secondly, because the media today seems to be picking up everything. I've had this experience in '99 at the same place. I've had a similar experience later in 2005, 2006, 2007 at the same place. It's been happening. These are one of those 8 disputed points which are mutually acknowledged, and this kind of things happen. What is different this time is the number of troops. Almost a battalion strength of troops, maybe a little more, and the timing at 3 o'clock in the morning, primarily to include and with concurrence at the highest headquarters. Probably she himself must be the president, himself must be monitoring it and ensuring that these kind of things being given to the Western Theatre Command. So this kind of a thing, I think issues of national security must be preserved. And earlier also, when these things happened, I've never heard such things. I don't think anybody knows also what happened in '99 or what happened in 2005, 6, 7, nothing. Nobody knows anything of that kind. But the very fact that public figures must avoid making loose statements. That is the first thing.
Lieutenant General Kulkarni, do you find the stand of the government of India plausible that not all issues can be debated on the floor of the House, on the floor of the Parliament?
100%. There are certain issues. Supposing I wish to know certain things, by all means, you walk up to the chamber of the minister, hold for a a closed meeting, find out whatever doubts you have, rather than debate in the parliament. The government has given a statement that should be adequate. It is the government. It has nothing to do with the political party. Any political party can form a government, and whoever is the government, the army is the national army. It's the Indian army, whichever government in power, and therefore the army in any case will not be pulled and pushed into these kind of things. But issues of national security must not be debated. There are certain sensitive issues. The relations between the two countries, China and India, at the lowest ebb. There is stability. There's maybe absolute stability right now, but situation is tense. You know what's happening all around. We have to be absolutely vigilant.
How does this political discourse? How does this political discourse affect the armed forces? Because this is an age of information. Everybody is watching what is happening in national media and in national politics. And more importantly, vis-a-vis a neighbor like Chinese and their propaganda machinery. This broken political discourse, the absence of a united stand, how does it reflect?
See, the Chinese what is the aim of the Chinese? Is to weaken India, to off-balance India, to keep India boxed in South Asia, let it not rise. That's what is the aim. And all this, what happens in India, is benefiting the enemy. That's China. Well, as regards the morale of the Indian armed forces is concerned, they don't, it doesn't really matter to them what's happening and what they talk, because they know it is all, this political bickering is something which is in a democracy.
And their morale is made of sterner stuff. I mean, these kind of loose statements are not going to affect the Javans who have put their lives at risk. I want to cut across to Professor Victor Gao as well. I also have Sanjay Gupta ji from Shiv Sena joining us on the broadcast. But before that, Professor Victor Gao, the Chinese policy of transgression and aggression when it comes to their expansionist agenda is something that most experts across the world point out is likely to continue in the times to come. Will a neighbor like China really walk the talk when it comes to diplomatic efforts? Because the government of India has made persistent efforts to reach out. Both sides have sat down on the table multiple times. There's still process of disengagement which is going on, and it looks like that China has opened yet another front in Tawang. Professor Gao.
Thank you very much for having me. Please allow me to make several very important points.
Sure.
First of all, China has 14 land neighboring countries. China has signed the border treaties with 12 of them. Only India and Bhutan have not yet concluded a border treaty with China. So this is the overall context that you should think about the border issues between China and India. Secondly, China does not view India as an enemy. Philosophically speaking, China and India are not enemies against each other, and they should not be enemies with each other. And China has all the goodwill and friendship towards the people in India. Historically speaking, for thousands of years, there have been no fundamental differences or conflicts between China and India, whatever you think about India as it is throughout the historical frameworks. And the border disputes which do exist today are not the responsibility of either China or India. Who should be held responsible for that? It's the British Indian Empire, which pursued the expansionist strategy into China and into many other neighboring regions, for example. And neither China nor India should be held as hostages of the expansionist British Indian Empire policies. And if India today wants to step into the shoes of the former British Indian Empire, it will not work and it will not succeed.
Professor Gao, a follow-up question. Please allow me one interjection. While you may be right about the colonial legacy that we have to deal with, India is only pursuing its national interests. Yes, there are various points of conflict and dispute that exist between the two countries, but the kind of aggressive posturing we have seen from the side of Chinese, the aggressive tactics which have been deployed at the LAC, does not speak the language of a friendly nation.
I do not see this as what you describe. First of all, there are border disputes between China and India. We should not neglect that. We should not disregard that. We should not ignore these territorial disputes. Then secondly, there is only one viable way to solve the disputes between China and India. That is through peaceful negotiations, through diplomacy, rather than through warmongering or military confrontations or even war. A war between China and India will be mutually destructive to both China and India, and will be the last thing that China and India would need at this time. In the world, both China and India are considered very successful emerging markets. We should really devote ourselves to peaceful development, to lifting our people out of poverty, to improve the living
Well, Professor
conditions
Gao,
of
I
everyone
agree with
in
you that
China
those
and
should be the
in
development
India.
goal for any nation, and especially at a time when China continues to face a very difficult situation once again due to COVID-19. Shifting our focus once again back to the domestic politics, Sanjay Gupta ji is with us on the broadcast. He's been patiently waiting. Sanjay ji, आपके पास आऊंगी. And I want to talk about the statement that was made by Sanjay Raut today. Concerning China, and yes, he was talking about the Belagavi border dispute, but he said जैसे China घुसा है वैसे हम भी घुसेंगे. Is that the language of a national politician of a country, sir?
देखिए, उनके कहने का ताल्लुक और जिस तरह से उन्होंने कहा, उनका ताल्लुक सिर्फ इसी बात से है कि इस मुद्दे को सरकार, केंद्र सरकार गंभीरता से ले, क्योंकि किसी भी मुद्दे को लंबा खींचने का भी एक समय होता है. अब आजाद भारत के अंदर अगर हमारे देश के अंदर राज्यों का गठन किया गया तो संस्कृति और भाषा के आधार पर ही किया गया. आज 60 साल से मामला पेंडिंग है. मतलब जब केंद्र में भी बीजेपी की सरकार है और महाराष्ट्र में भी आज उनकी क्लाइंट्स है, तो किस लिए कर्नाटका के और महाराष्ट्र के मुद्दों को सुलझाया जाता?
नहीं, लेकिन संजय जी, बेलगावी का जो पूरा मसला है वो तो दशकों से पड़ा हुआ है. वो ऐसा मसला है जिसका कोई सोल्यूशन अभी तक नहीं निकल पाया. जब कांग्रेस की सरकार थी महाराष्ट्र में, कर्नाटका में और केंद्र में, तब भी इसका हल नहीं निकल पाया था. सुप्रीम कोर्ट तक ये मसला जा चुका है, लेकिन वो तो मसला है ही नहीं यहाँ पे. आप बेलगावी के बारे में जो भी बात करना चाहे करें, महाराष्ट्र की जो भी कंसर्न है आप उठाना चाहें जरूर उठाएं, लेकिन उसमें चाइना की बात ले आना और ऐसा कहना जैसे चाइना घुसा वैसे हम भी घुसेंगे, मतलब शिवसेना या महाराष्ट्र तो चाइना नहीं हो सकता ना, चीन नहीं हो सकता, ये भाषा नहीं हो सकती जिसके बारे में हम नेशनल सिक्योरिटी के ऊपर बात करेंगे. संजय जी,
तो इस बात को कहने का ताल्लुक सिर्फ इसी बात से है, जैसे पत्रकारिता की दुनिया में कई बार बात को इस तरह से कहा जाता है कि जिससे सरकार उसमें टेंशन लेती है. तो इस बात को कहने का ताल्लुक सिर्फ इतना. ऐसा थोड़ी है संजय राउत जी कोई पाकिस्तान की सेना उनके पास है, चाइना की उनके पास सेना है, या कोई मिलिट्री है उनके पास. वो जस्ट एक सरकार की टेंशन क्रिएट करने के लिए उन्होंने इस तरह की स्टेटमेंट दी है कि इस बात को गंभीरता से लेते हुए.
आपको लगता है उनको इस तरह का स्टेटमेंट नहीं देना चाहिए था? आपको लगता है गलत तरीका था बात करने का?
तो सही तरीके से बात करते करते हो तो कितना टाइम हो गया. अब आप मुझे बताइए कि मतलब 60 साल तक आजाद भारत के अंदर किसी मामले को पेंडिंग रखा जाएगा, अदालतों के अंदर इसको रखा जाएगा, तो एक दिन तो इंसान कुछ इस तरह की स्टेटमेंट देगा.
आपको जो बोलना है आप बीजेपी को बोलिए या आप अपने राजनीतिक प्रतिद्वंदियों को बोलिए, आप राष्ट्र की सुरक्षा के बारे में ऐसे थोड़ी बोलेंगे.
राष्ट्र की सुरक्षा से ताल्लुक इसमें किसी तरह का कोई ऐसा बयान नहीं है. राहुल गांधी जी ने जो बयान दिया है वो एक अलग चीज है, और जो संजय राउत जी ने कहा है वो एक अलग चीज है. आप राहुल गांधी जी के बयान को संजय राउत जी के बयान के साथ नहीं कंपेयर कर सकते. वो एक अलग चीज है और ये एक अलग चीज है. वो उनका जो संजय राउत जी ने बयान दिया है वो जस्ट एक तंज कसना है सरकार के ऊपर के मामले की गंभीरता को समझते हुए इस मामले पर जल्दी से डिसीजन लिया जाए. और जो राहुल गांधी जी ने बयान दिया है वो एकदम अलग चीज है. उन्होंने तो स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड जो कहा है, हम मुझसे इत्तेफाक नहीं रखते.
राजनीति में तंज कसना कोई नई बात नहीं है, आए दिन होता रहता है, मगर कई मुद्दे ऐसे हैं जो राजनीतिक तंजों से परे होने चाहिए. यही एक पूरा तर्क है जो मैं आपको देने की कोशिश कर रही थी. शाजिया आलमी, आई वांट यू टू कम इनटू दिस डिस्कशन. शिवसेना आर्ग्यूज दैट we were only trying to get the attention of the government. Why are you making a big deal out of it?
Well, it's the kind of language used and the references used. If there's an allusion to India-China dispute across the LAC, and that is referred to in a extremely aggressive manner, belligerent manner, with reference to Maharashtra-Karnataka border row, obviously people would ask questions, and it is just very unfortunate. But going back to the earlier conversation, the person on China who was talking about that China wants to maintain a good, wants to keep India as a friendly neighbor. Well, somebody has to talk about the incursions that have taken, the skirmishes, and it is India's stand which has always talked about de-escalation and disengagement. And this has been India's policy. And I also want to tell Aishwarya and the spokesperson of the Congress party that I don't know what canards you're here to spread or your leader has told you to, but I want to reiterate the words of our Raksha Mantri, our defense minister, that India is an Indian army is fully prepared for all military contingencies and against any aggressive threat, against any modernized military methods and action taken by any of our neighbors. So please do not undermine the strength of our army and of India. That Sanjay Raut and the other political adversary, the Congress representative, can have a problem. Politically. Do not dare talk about Indian army being unprepared.
Aishwarya, some minutes ago you were talking about the semantics of something. The fact that at a time when we are seeing heightened tensions with the Chinese, we have neighbors like China and Pakistan, and this is not ordinary peaceful times. There are multiple friction points. Congress party has been saying that look how aggressive Chinese have been in such a difficult time that the Indian security forces are facing right now. At such a time, to be so off on the national security narrative, is this just about semantics or points out to the rather, a deeper issue with the ideology that BJP accuses you of, that you don't believe in India's forces, you don't believe in India's national security, and perhaps your narrative helps the enemy nation?
Honestly, we do not require any lecture from the government or the dispensation in power today. Let's make one thing very clear. The Raksha Mantri may say something the same way that the finance minister talks about how our economy is absolutely fabulous, but the reality on the ground is different. I may support my troops. I also know that our Jawans, whether equipped or not, will still fight for their motherland stronger and with more enthusiasm than anybody else. But that does not take away from the fact that the reality is different. Shazia had a diatribe and a lot of talk about, you cannot say we're underprepared, but I am not saying we're underprepared. Whether you look at the demand for grants, whether you look at even the hike in the defense budget is all for pre-committed liabilities as well as pensions, while modernization has taken a back foot. You see that the army chief, the chief of the armed forces as well as the Air Force also says that there are lower on squadrons. You see that the Navy has...
I can pull out 10 such CAG reports during the UPA tenure and quote you the same thing.
Okay, again, Anusha, you have not interrupted Shazia during the entire...
I did not interrupt you. I'm only interjecting you. I'm only saying that what you're citing as evidence is also an evidence that existed during your tenure.
Let me conclude. The fact of the matter remains today. I am a proud Indian. I am extremely proud of my armed forces. But I cannot stay silent when I believe that there could be a lot more that could have been done better. Whether it is India's policy of import and export to China, whether it is India's policy on having military exercises with China and Russia in 2022, even after our Jawans were martyred, or whether it is India's policy on recruitment or insurance or pensions, or even further arming and modernizing the armed forces. I am an Indian just as much as anybody. My party does not need...
do not shout and scream. And while on one hand you say...
One second. So Aishwarya, you are backtracking on your statement that you made just few minutes ago, that army is underprepared. You're backtracking on that.
Takes away from the fact that there is work to be done that has not been done. The big cover-up remains, whether it is information...
No, there is no cover-up. Again, there is no cover-up. Aishwarya, there is no cover-up. Please do not, please do not be, don't try and be too clever by half. It will not work.
Somebody makes
trying to be too clever by half to cover up the complete buffoonery of your leader will not work. The cover-up of the buffoonery and anti-India sentiment expressed by your leader will not work. This is a cover-up. And it's a bosh job. And it's very evident from all the backtracking you've done and all the going back and forth you've done on what you wanted to say. Clearly, it is very sad. No amount of cleverness will help you. Let me tell you. And I'm not saying the BJP doesn't need to tell you anything. The common citizen of this country will tell you. The common citizen of this country will tell you, Aishwarya, and your leader.
Tazia, you have no facts.
You have no facts whatsoever. You have no facts whatsoever. I'm not even talking about what UPA did or did not do. I'm not even talking about it.
Be a parliamentarian, you could replace
the problem. Our aggressors are our enemies.
One thing
This
is
is not something
one
you
thing is
should
for
be
sure that
speaking
when it
with.
comes to
You know nothing.
when it comes to national security, the retweaking has happened of the
Like a
narrative,
leader, you
and
know
clearly the
nothing.
opposition needs to catch up. The last has not been said. LAC, of course, is a situation that the Raksha Mantri has already made a statement on the floor of the House. The government says that the issue is far more sensitive to be discussed on the floor of the House. Yes, the opposition has all the right to demand a discussion, but the final decision rests with the elected government of the day to take a call. What are the details they want to divulge in the national interest? With that, I thank all my guests for joining us on the broadcast. Shazia Almi, Aishwarya. We also had Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, Professor Victor Gao and Sanjay Gupta. Thank you all for joining us on the broadcast. We're stepping into a very short break. And coming up on the other side, as COVID surge in China continues, how worried we should be. Stay tuned.
Evening after this announcement. Earlier, Taliban had banned secondary education also. Now, to give us more details on this, I am being joined live by my colleague Abhishek Jha. Abhishek, further gags on women's freedom?
Of course, and this is not the thing that was not being expected, because initially, ever since Taliban has came into power in Kabul and almost all of Afghanistan, they have tried to increasingly ban women's participation in social arena. That includes education, because that is one of the most important area. Initially, they barred women from going to colleges. Then they separated, boys students from girls students. The classes continued. It was always a hiccup. It was always difficult for women to attend classes. In fact, in various rural areas of Afghanistan, women were barred from having even primary education. So there were multiple type of prohibition imposed on women education in Afghanistan. But now, with the latest dictate that has come from the Afghanistan's official minister, it looks like the total blanket ban has been imposed on women education, and it is coming at a time when world is increasingly integrating women workforce in its prosperity, in its development, and Afghanistan, which is dealing with a lot of economic crisis and social crisis, at this time it is trying to prohibit 50% of its population from becoming part of its mainstream growth, is something that is not going to do well to the Afghanistan economy and its social milieu.
Abhishek, the last time on such a clampdown was imposed, we saw some protests happening. This time on, what is the reaction that's coming forth?
So there has always been protests. In fact, we have seen how women, like even in small groups, they tried to come on streets and protest to Afghanistan. They stood guard to colleges and students and schools. They tried to protect their rights, even in the thrashing, in the face of thrashing and beating from Afghan soldiers and their recruits. But it looks like that now Afghanistan, when they have total control of the territory, and they have started imposing their brutal and ruthless ruling. Not much of the protests could be seen on the streets, because they are literally taking people, detaining them. People are disappearing because of protests and the rights that they demand from the Afghan's current government, that is Taliban rulers. So maybe not that much of protest, but yeah, internationally it has invited a lot of condemnation, including from United Nations and including USA. So, like, while international agencies and countries would continue to work towards humanitarian aid and assistance to the people of Afghanistan, women and girls of Afghanistan, education is something that the government and the local authorities in Afghanistan will have to ensure. And if they try to bring a law where women are not allowed to attend schools, then probably not much can be done by the international agencies or outside forces in Afghanistan.
Well, this indeed is grave situation emerging in India's neighborhood. Abhishek, if I may request you to continue to be with us, there's some more breaking news that's coming in now. Now, India on women's rights issue in Taliban, we hear Ruchira Kamboj, who's the permanent ambassador of India to the United Nations, at UNSC briefing on Afghanistan, She says concerns have also been expressed on the further erosion of human rights, including the rights of women and girls, as well as the lack of progress on inclusive governance. India also raised an alarm over relations between Taliban and Al-Qaeda remain close and is underscored by the presence both in Afghanistan and in the region. Concerns have been expressed that the group has reversed policies and gone back on commitments made prior to assuming the power. Now, Abhishek continues to be with us. Abhishek, this is India registering some strong protest about the developments in Afghanistan.
Yeah, Vinaya, and everything that happens in Afghanistan is a concern to India because everything that is bad in Afghanistan society will spill over in some time and it will start impacting Indian territories as well. We can talk about terrorist organization, radicalization, the kind of society that Taliban wants to create where women are not allowed to participate in the social activities. So this whole radicalization and harboring of terrorist organization and individuals is something that India is very concerned about. It has raised this issue in past also, and now with Taliban increasingly coming out with their strong radical and Islamist, so-called Islamist way of ruling in Afghanistan, it is a clear concern that the soil of Afghanistan will now be a very safe haven for various terrorist organizations that have been operating across the globe, especially Al-Qaeda, which has had a very close linkage with Taliban in the past. But this time around, Taliban has been trying to distance itself from any global organization of which is involved in terrorist activities. They have tried to, express a face where they try to become a Taliban, a little modernized, little moderate, and with inclusive also. But with each passing day, it is actually unmasking itself and bringing out its worst fear of in its neighborhood, where people had always anticipated that Taliban had not changed fundamentally. They remain the same. They are same radical fundamentally.
Welcome back. You're watching Brass Tacks. We might like to believe that COVID-19 is past us and the world has come back to normal, but the alarming situation being reported from China is clearly worrying. With high number of cases and casualties being reported from the epicenter of COVID-19, Health Minister here in India, Mr. Mansukh Mandavia, has sounded an alert. The Health Minister chaired a meeting to review the COVID preparedness. He also assured that the Union government is prepared to deal with any kind of situation. Well, not just here in India, but the United States has also raised an alarm over the possibility of new mutations. With reports of hospitals being overwhelmed, crematoriums being burdened, which are coming from China to light, remember this surge is a very, very worrying pattern. A surge in cases and deaths in China was reported as country eased out of its zero COVID policy earlier this month after the protest took place. What does it mean for India? How prepared are we? That's our focus.
Cars waiting to get into that cremation area. There are many security guards patrolling this entire area. And I spoke to a man earlier who said that his close friend passed away from a fever, though the hospital didn't say why. He said he's been waiting here for hours.
नॉर्मल लाइफ लीड करिए, कोविड अप्रोप्रिएट बिहेवियर रखिए, सिम्टम आते हैं टेस्टिंग कराइए और प्रिकॉशन डोज लगाइए.
Well, joining us on the broadcast is Dr. Isaac Bagoch. He's an infectious disease specialist from the Toronto General Hospital. Dr. Ankita Baidya, who's an infectious diseases specialist, is also joining us on the broadcast. Dr. Naresh Chawla, who's the National Joint Secretary of the IMA, is also with us on the broadcast. Dr. Chawla, I'm coming to you first. How prepared is India and what's happening in China? What kind of message does it send for India? We have seen this pandemic for more than 2 years now. How prepared are we?
Listen, a few ground realities. Number one, just imagine just 2 days back, the thing was not on the media at all.
Sure.
And within 2 days, everything seems to have changed. So let me tell you, the ground reality is nothing much is changed. No doubt, we are seeing news of overcrowded cemeteries and crematoriums, and the media is blaring here and there. Too many things. But as far as our India is concerned, so let me take a very realistic attitude.
Sure.
We are also panicking. So my consolation to all my countrymen is, kindly do not panic. We must not forget the few ground realities. We have had more than 200 crore vaccinations done. We suffered a lot during all the first, second, third wave, etc. And we got a lot of natural infection, which must have given us good immunity. Number three, since we were already immunized by BC, etc. things, so we already were good enough. And we Indians as a race have done fairly well. So do not feel overwhelmed, and the people do not have to be panicky. Even the government, be it central government, state governments, district administrations, do not be panicky. But only one ground reality, that we must take all the minimum corona precautions, corona appropriate behaviors, use of a mask. Believe me, I practice in Delhi NCR. There is not even 1% use of mask. Not even 1%. So we have to go back to our corona protocol. If we do that, we follow the principle of social distancing and minimum of hand wash and hand sanitization, and our own good eating and good immunity. I'm sure we protect ourselves against corona, also against the impending flu and currently occurring flu all across Delhi. We are the patients, the doctors who are seeing patients, and hospitals, dispensaries, clinics. We are seeing too many cases of flu.
Well, sir, the guards were clearly lowered down. I mean, the mask protocol is hardly followed. The mandatory masking has also been done away with, keeping in mind that the cases had fallen in Delhi and in other parts of the country as well. Andrew K.P. Leung is also joining us on the broadcast, who's an international and independent China strategist. Andrew, I want to understand from you how alarming the situation is right now in China, and how cautious should the world be? I mean, I agree with the experts here that this is not the time to panic, but we must have a realistic account and assessment as to what is to come, because it starts in China and that's how it goes to the rest of the world, including India.
Well, it's been 3 years since China exercised this very strict lockdown protocol. And so far, China has been doing reasonably well in managing the pandemic, according to a recent study by New York-based Edelman Trust Barometer, EDELMAN, Edelman Trust Barometer based in New York, which look at countries around the world as to how people feel their government managing the pandemic. And China came up tops. That was the January 2022. But now it's been 3 years and people's patience is wearing thin. And meanwhile, the pandemic is changing into morphing into endemic. In other words, becomes just one of a very common disease people have to live with, like a very severe case of flu. And this is happening all over the world. I mean, if you go to the United Kingdom and go into the United States, and governments are no longer reporting on these cases because, you know, the Western governments simply chose to live with the virus from the very, very early stage. But the cost is that if you live with the virus too soon, then the number of death cases have built up. For example, the United States have suffered more than 1 million deaths. If China, followed the same protocol, China's population is 4 times as large, and then the medical facility, the system is not as advanced, and there are many more vulnerable groups, then China would have suffered many, many more deaths. But I think that overall, China managed it quite well. But then the sudden relaxation have caused a great deal of alarm amongst the population. Because they're not used to it, and they're now required to self-test, and some of the tests are not reported, and some are. So the government is no longer reporting on these cases like any other country.
There's one more thing I want to know. Are the Chinese sharing information and reporting facts with honesty? Because China has concealed information, and that has not worked in the interest of world health. Right now, with the kind of surge and the cases which are being reported, information sharing by the Chinese is very crucial. That's what the WHO also said today.
Well, I think that in the beginning, when the virus first happened, reported in Wuhan, there was a bit of a hiccup. But very quickly in January, don't forget, in January 2019, I believe, 2020, 2020, in January, China, make the cases, reported these cases to international peer-reviewed journals, sharing the DNA and so on and so forth. But a lot of countries did not take heed. For example, the United States laughed at this of this virus, resulting in upsurge.
Okay.
But now, as I said, now the virus is more into an endemic, and like many other countries, China can no longer report on these cases because the rigid protocol is no longer exercised, and people just self-testing themselves. Some are not reported, so there is no point in reporting this information, which would be highly misleading.
Well, WHO says that they've just put out a couple of tweets on the social media, and they said that we need more information coming in from China. Dr. Isaac Bagoch is also joining us on the broadcast. Doctor, coming to you, how do you view the situation in China right now, in multiple cities of China, in Beijing and other parts, especially with the hospitals overcrowded? Is this something that can be controlled locally? Because whatever we know of COVID-19 in more than 2 years, so far dealing with the pandemic, it starts somewhere and then it starts going to different countries. Is that the trajectory which is likely to happen even now? That's what the world is scared of.
Yeah, I think the bigger concern would be what's going to happen within China. And obviously, we just wish everyone well. We don't want to see anyone on the planet harmed by this virus, including China. But unfortunately, they're going to have a large wave. I would remind people watching this that obviously we know that the vaccines are very helpful in terms of protecting people against some of the more severe manifestations of the virus. But it's extremely important that that people get the vaccines and, of course, get booster doses of vaccines. Unfortunately, some of the information we're seeing from China and some of the data we've seen emerge from China is that many people have not been vaccinated, especially older individuals and individuals who might be at greater risk for more severe infection. Even if, and the other important point too is that China has seen very little at a population level in a manner of infection relative to other countries on the world. So they don't have the same degree of what we would call hybrid immunity that other countries have. I'm not saying it's good to get infected, the opposite. I'm just saying we just can't ignore that hybrid immunity from infection and recovery from infection coupled with vaccination provides more robust community level protection. Sadly, China doesn't have that. And they're going to see, and they're already seeing, a very large outbreak. One other reminder is that we saw this play out in Hong Kong earlier when you had an under-vaccinated older cohort of individuals. And for a period of time, Hong Kong sadly had one of the highest rates of death on the planet. So I think China obviously needs to work very hard on ensuring people are vaccinated and boosted, especially older, more vulnerable communities.
Does it set for the rest of the world? What kind of alarm bells does it set for the rest of the world?
You know what, in all fairness, like, yeah, sure, having 1.4 billion people sadly exposed to this virus can certainly help facilitate or increase the likelihood of more mutations and more variants developing. But in all fairness, too, like to date, the vaccines have done a remarkable job standing up to protecting people against more severe infection like hospitalization and death. Not as much as before, protecting us against infection and onward transmission, but protecting us against hospitalization and death, regardless of the variant. Ancestral strain, alpha variant, delta variant, Omicron variant, various sublineages of Omicron. The vaccines have done a remarkable job with protecting us. So it's time to get those vaccines out.
It's time to get those vaccines. It's time to get back those protocols that have been done away with, like it was being pointed out by Dr. Naresh Chawla. Dr. Ankita Bed is also with us on the broadcast. Dr. Ankita, coming to you, when it comes to COVID protocols, of course, all of us have lowered our guards. We have seen that the mandatory mask mandate has been done away with. Social distancing is not being followed. And that was perhaps the right response in those circumstances when the COVID cases had really come down. With the present reality and that variant traveling to India and to different parts. What kind of preparedness do we really need to have in place? And considering our vaccination rate and the success of the vaccination program, how prepared is our country?
So we need to learn, Anusha, what was not there in the second wave.
Yeah.
We had less of hospital beds. We have lack of oxygen supply at various levels. And that actually we suffered a lot in second wave. So if we have taken learning lesson from that, so we need to upgrade our systems. Now again recheck whether all the oxygen plants are at place or not, if at all the hospitalization is required. Apart from this, if I see that the statistics that is being coming, that only 27-28% of our population is being vaccinated with precautionary dose, I am little worried about this. I feel what we had seen with the Omicron variant, this year we had milder cases, not much of hospitalization, and yes, gatherings are going on. Everything is back to normal.
Back to
if
normal,
we see closely what is happening in the society, where everything is very close to back to normal. But the figures that vaccination, usually it's recommended in India that every 9 months you need to take booster dose. That is lacking. The percentage of precautionary dose, the people who got this vaccine is less. So I'm worried. I appeal everyone, go for your vaccination dose. As Dr. Isaac also rightly mentioned, that this vaccine might not prevent you just from infection or the transmission, but it will help you to prevent against hospitalization and getting a severe form of COVID. So go for your vaccination, especially elderly population, people with comorbidity who are at risk of getting this infection. Go for your vaccination dose. So this is very important.
Dr. Chawla, the issue of waning immunity and the need to get booster doses, especially for the vulnerable population, the elderlies, people with comorbid conditions. Once again, the basics of 5W1H, how we had tackled COVID-19 earlier, all those protocols need to be brought back.
Let me share one thing very frankly, that scientifically and medically we know, but we don't acknowledge it, that the virus is weakening. Don't forget, after the second wave in 21 April, May, after that we heard of many waves coming, but all those viruses variants were less lethal, they were more virulent, they were more infectious. But down the line in clinics and dispensaries and hospitals, we saw lots of cases, but we did not see much deaths. And I'm sure I agree with my co-panelist that the virus from becoming after having been a pandemic, it has been reduced to endemic. As I must share that as we used to have viral fever or flu or influenza in India, we will have it as an endemic only. So there is, just imagine, from yesterday to today, I have appeared in almost 9 television interviews and none in last 6 months on corona. That means that is the kind of panic reaction even the polity is showing, even the media is showing. So I like to put the record straight.
Dr. Naresh Chawla, most politely, I mean, I think the reaction is not so much of a panic. The reaction is coming in from the lessons which have been very hard learned, and you're the doctor at the front line, you would know it better than me. The painful losses that families have suffered, and we don't want to repeat our mistakes. And I think it's only in the larger public interest that we reiterate through doctors like you that wear your mask, wash your hands. If you have not taken your booster shots, please take them.
I'm coming down the line, that only. The word COVID-19, tell it to anyone. ये वापस आ गया, has it come back? So that word frightened for 3 long years. Don't forget, in an authoritarian society like China, the people protested. The people fought with military. So what I'm trying to say is, we must gullet down only that kind of advice which is acceptable to people. So the acceptable advice is, on one side, the national government, state governments, district administration must maintain a vigil, must maintain a preparedness.
And that's what the health minister has also said. Andrew KP Levy, I'm coming back to you. And I reiterate the point that I was making earlier, that the World Health Organization has said that more information needs to come in from China so that the world can be better prepared. There are better precautions that can be taken. While you're saying that the Chinese are making efforts to contain this, internally, and, perhaps the entire world won't be jeopardized by it, but the kind of images that have been coming out of crematoriums being unfortunately flooded, hospitals being overcrowded, it does look like a very alarming situation.
So I was saying, sorry. Yeah, please.
Yes, Andrew, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sorry, as I was saying at the beginning, there was a initial panic of the Chinese population not getting used to a sudden, completely, sort of abandoning all these strict measures all at once. And then people are expected to self-test. And then if you self-test, and obviously people find that, oh, they've been infected, but in fact, the infection doesn't necessarily mean any severe kind of impact, because most of these cases are asymptomatic, and then if they get affected, it doesn't mean that they will
I'm
end up
sorry,
in the
I'm sorry, I'm
hospital.
interrupting you, but
So-
there's a US-based Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation, IHME. It has made a forecast of about 1 million deaths in China that could face an explosion of COVID-19. How do you see that?
Well, I think that estimate is really over the tops. It's not based on science. It's based on just a sort of mathematical projection in a different environment. I mean, look at China. I mean, as I said, with their own vaccines, and they've managed to keep down the death rate, sort of multiple levels below the United States. The United States has suffered over 1 million deaths, and China is no way near that number, even though China's population is 4 times as high.
Well,
So I think
I
this
only hope,
prediction of 1 million
that
deaths
this is we
nowhere.
don't want this unfortunate situation to emerge in any part of the world, and this is the time for countries like India and for the rest of the world to go back to the basics: wear your mask, follow your hand hygiene, make sure you take all the precautions. And the government of India says that we are well prepared to deal with the situation. I thank all of you for joining us on the broadcast. When it comes to COVID-19, we cannot let our guard down. With that, it's a wrap from my side. Ridhima joins you with the News Epicenter. Good evening. Thanks a lot for staying with us here at CNN News 18. You're watching News Epicenter with me, Ridhima Bhatnagar. Politics has erupted once again over Congress's Bharat Jodo Yatra. After concerns were raised over Yatris being COVID positive and the Yatra going forward without any COVID protocols, a letter was sent by the Health Minister. Now, this letter was sent to Rahul Gandhi and the Rajasthan Chief Minister, Ashok Gehlot. The Health Minister asked them to ensure that proper COVID guidelines are being followed, and in case if proper regulations are not followed, then the Yatra should be stopped, keeping in mind the public health emergency situation. In response to the Health Minister's letter, you had the Congress MPs reacting. For example, you had Congress MP Karti Chidambaram questioning the centre for targeting only the Grand Old Party, that too when there are no restrictions on other public gatherings. You then had Congress MP Arunachal Pradesh also asking the centre whether Prime Minister Narendra Modi followed COVID protocols during the Gujarat elections. Remember, the Health Minister's letter comes amid renewed concerns triggered by a fresh spurt of cases in China and other places globally as well. In China, top epidemiologists are predicting infections in millions. So is this selective targeting or is this the need of the hour?
कोविड अप्रोप्रिएट बिहेवियर रखिए, सिम्टम आते हैं टेस्टिंग कराइए और प्रिकॉशन डोज लगाइए। भारत जोड़ो यात्रा में गए हुए कई लोगों को कोविड पॉजिटिव पाया गया है, तो उसके लिए प्रिकॉशन लिया जाए, कोविड प्रोटोकॉल का पालन किया जाए।
राहुल जी, बी राहुल, नॉट रोबिन। मत करिए ऐसा काम। तो आप तो सत्ता का सुख भोगने के लिए यात्रा निकाल रहे हैं, लेकिन एक भारतीय नागरिक की जान पे खतरा बना है। क्या ये चिंताजनक नहीं है? क्या ये हमारी जिम्मेदारी और दायित्व नहीं है?
बीजेपी खुद विचलित हो गई है, डिस्टर्ब हो गई है और होना स्वाभाविक है। जो सफलता मिल रही है यात्रा को,
Let me also now bring in our guest to take this conversation forward. We have the Congress spokesperson, Lavanya Balal. We'll shortly be joined by the spokesperson of the BJP as well.
We also have Dr. Rajiv Dasgupta, Professor, JNU and member, National AEFI Committee. Good to have both of you on the broadcast with us as we await the spokesperson of the BJP. But Lavanya, let me kickstart the conversation with you. I'm sure you would have also seen the videos and reports that are coming out of China. Top epidemiologists, as I said when I started the show, they're predicting that 60% of China's population could be wiped out. 10% of the Earth's population could also be wiped out. Infections could be in millions. So the concern for India is what is happening globally, unfortunately, will not be restricted to just those parts, but will have a pattern, and we will see infections rise in India as well. At that time, if you're having public rallies, if you're having large gatherings, isn't it the responsibility of people, political parties, to have caution themselves? So if in that backdrop, the health minister has written a letter, what's the problem?
Absolutely, you're right. In the backdrop of raising numbers of COVID patients in China, we have to take precautions. I understand that he has written to Rahul Gandhi ji to suspend the Bharat Jodo Yatra. You know, all health-related issues should come from concerns that is health-related and not political reasons. Decisions should never be based on political reasons, because a couple of days ago in Agartala, our Honorable Prime Minister had a huge program where there were thousands and thousands of people who had gathered, correct? So why was it that it was not a provoking or it was not a health concern? Why is only the Bharat Jodo Yatra a health concern is one of the questions. Also, yes, we agree. We have to follow the COVID rules and regulations. If we are asked to do that, we will follow that. But at the same time, are COVID protocols being followed in airport, railways, malls, pubs, and other public places? Why isn't the health minister addressing that? What is the health protocol that is being, followed across the nation? There should be something, not just for the yatra, but for the entire nation. Isn't it an emergency that, he should be issuing protocols for the
So I heard
entire
you
nation?
patiently,
And
Lavanya. And this is where I have a bit of a problem. And we have RP Singh of the BJP also now joining us. So good to have you on the broadcast with us. But, Lavanya, we heard from the health minister today. He even briefed the media personnel. He said that I had numbers to work with. I knew that yatris in this Bharat Jodo Yatra were turning positive. So in that backdrop, the worry was that if there are already people who are COVID positive, they will be spreading to other people. Then why should the health minister be targeted? Because he's not speaking as a spokesperson of one political party. He has accountability to the country.
absolutely, you're absolutely right. He's accountable to the nation. That is exactly why I'm asking you, how many people were tested who turned up at the Agartala meeting of the Prime Minister, the public meeting? How many people have been tested? And if they have not been tested, why haven't they been tested for COVID? And also, as a health minister who is answerable to the whole nation, what is the COVID protocol that he is issuing for the nation? That is his duty. That is his job. He is responsible for the lives of 1 billion Indians. Why isn't he issuing an health protocol for the entire nation, and why only for the yatra? We have no issues with the health protocol that is issuing
RP Singh
us.
respond to the criticism coming in from the Congress. They're saying two things. One, they're saying that there are no official protocols and guidelines in place, so we don't know what to follow. The other example that has been given by the Congress is that look at what the BJP is doing. The Prime Minister had a rally in Tripura just a few days ago. There is currently a Jan Akrosh rally that is taking place as well. So is the BJP trying to say that COVID is following only the Congress's yatra?
Well, the letter is to Mr. Gehlot also. He should take care of the Jan Akrosh rally also. Of other regard, Mr. Kejriwal can also take care of the yatra which has to come to Delhi, because the health is a state subject. So they should also take care. Yeah. Now it's no more that the countrywide thing which is happening, only because there have been cases which have been reported from the yatra, Bharat Jodo Yatra. That's why the issue was picked up, and then the message was sent. It's advisory to the organizer of Bharat Jodo Yatra. Now it's up to them to decide whether they want to continue with it, or whether they want to take precaution or not. Tomorrow, at least, something happens. They can't come back to us and say, or come back to the government, sorry, and say that, oh, the government didn't want